Welcome back, guys, to another episode of Questbound Reader. Guys, I'm so happy to have you back. It's been a while. I've taken a week hiatus from reading. It took me a really long time to finish the book I was reading. Just very busy with work and life things. You guys know how it is. Anyway, I wanted to start off the year with a really good standalone, as of now, book that I read. It's probably one of the darkest books that I've read ever, and I'm so excited to share this with you because I think you're going to love it. So I am talking about the 11th Cycle by Kian Ardalan. And man, this is dark fantasy, high fantasy. This is horror. This is a lot of things all in one. It has a lot of military components, but I absolutely loved it. So I wanted to talk about what it's about first, and then I'm going to break it up into the categories that I usually do. So this, in my opinion, and this is not maybe everyone's take on it, but this is what I assessed from reading the book. This is a coming of age story in the middle of like everything else that could possibly go wrong. So you have a creature called Yeverus, and he is the 11th seed of the Elder King. Now, the Elder King, think of him as the biggest, baddest, strongest deity that's in creation. He's the one that created everything along with the creator, which to me, this has a lot of biblical, not references, but like similarities. Like you have the creator and then you have the Elder King who helps create. So I thought of like God and Jesus in a weird, twisted, horrible way. Anywho, so that's what it reminded me of. So you have the Elder King, and every 1,000 years, give or take, the Elder King spawns or fathers a seed, and this seed grows up in order to destroy the evil that's plaguing the world for the next 1,000 years, give or take, period, or for however long it takes him to expel or it to expel the evil. And then humanity gets added another month to their life. So as years pass, as seeds come, the period humans live longer. So when there was one seed, humans lived for a 1 month cycle over and over. And I guess I don't know how well they do age, but I find that interesting. Like how is just adding another month to the calendar just giving people more years? To me, that was kind of funky. But I guess there's like a predetermined or expected amount of years that people live in, and then if there's 5 months in a year, then it's going to be a lot shorter than 11 months or whatever the case might be. Anyway, in this book, there are a lot of religious sects and cults. Some people are pro the Elder King, who lives in Mount Moriar, which is kind of like in a different, not dimension, but like plane in the same dimension that we live in, where the walls are shifting and you're like in a dreamlike stance or state, but you're actually awake. It's very funky. I thought it was super cool, how they described it. I thought the creatures that they describe here are very different from humans. So you have your typical humans, and they're the predominant race. But then you have creatures that are, for example, like White Hawk, who is the body of like a human, a lot taller and bigger and stronger, but his head is like that of a hawk, a white hawk. His son, who shares very similar things to him. Then you have the Akar, who is the main opposing force to humans, and they are pretty much think of them as like 8, 9, 10 foot creatures that are much stronger than humans, with much more endurance, and they're warriors is what their race is. They're just genuine warriors, kind of like brutes. They're not very smart, not very intelligent. They can't organize their thoughts well, just because they're very emotional and they lead and live with those emotions, which I think is very interesting that they portray them like that. We have this book is a multiple POV book where you have it changes the different points of views. You have the point of view of Yeverus, the seed. You have Nora, who is a human. She's a battle hardened human who wants to make her name known to the world. You have Delilah, who's just a little girl, probably in her early teens or very or preteens maybe, And she's just playing around with her friends. You have Arafio. Oh my God, is that his name? I think I forgot his name. Let's go with that, Arafio. And you have um, Arafio, Nora, Delilah, Yeveris. I think that's it. I think. Oh, and Chroma, one of the Akar. Very important. So I I I wanna I want you guys to know with all my intention that this book is insane. First, I'm going to give you my rating, and this is a very easy 4.5 out of 5 stars for me. This book was amazing. I loved almost every single thing about it. It is twisted. It is creepy. It is crazy. It is disgusting at times. Sometimes you're gonna get really upset reading it and the things that happen to the people in this book. But ultimately, I want you to remember this is a coming of age for Yeveris, the Seed, disguised in the midst of the politics and the wars that are going on in the human realm, and that to me is what makes it so interesting. So, without further preamble, let's talk. So, um, I'm gonna start some spoilers here at the 6 minute and 30 second mark. So if you don't want spoilers, this is where you should hop off. But before I jump into the spoilers, I want to say that this book is very well written. It is not complex to read at all. It's very friendly. I think most people are put off by it because of the dark things that happen. And if that's not your style, then I get it. There's a lot of mental health issues that go on in this book. You have like a serial killer in the midst, and nobody knows who they are until the end of the book. But you can kind of guess if you really pay attention to some of the clues that the person says. You can kind of guess who they are. Um, I will tell you this: one thing that I didn't like is that Yeveris um, refers to everybody refers to him as they. So like they them like pronouns kind of thing, and they mask it under the guise that since he is a being unlike humans, he is an ascended being. He is the spawn of the Elder King. He is not a he or a she until it determines what sex it wants to be, and then his body transforms into that. Um, that was the only kind of funky thing that threw me off at the start because they kept saying they or their or them, and I was like, who are they referring to? Until you catch on. This is also a self-published book, which is probably the best self-published book that I've ever read in my life ever. Um, but yes, I'm gonna. I don't want to get into too many spoilers because this video will go on forever. This book is a chunker. It's like 900 something pages. Um, but it's sensational. You guys have to read this. Like, I don't know how else to explain that. The severity in which you should read this is high. Like, this is a great start to my reading year. Okay, so let's get into the spoilers. I kid. Now at the 8 minute and something mark. So, what happens in the story? Well, Yevers decides later on in the story that he is going to. Someone tells him a story about a person who split from his emotions, so anger, fear, compassion, all these other emotions, and to try to be a stronger, more like better individual, and then realizes that he has to go back and get these emotions to be a part of him again, but they refuse to. So then they form like a group of the emotions separate and him in order to be stronger than ever. So Yevers decides that he wants to do this because Yevers does not understand humans. And his task is to end the evil that is plaguing the world, essentially humans also. So he leaves the sanctuary that he is in against the Elder King's wishes and goes to Earth to find Delilah. Now, at this point, Delilah has gone through a lot of things. There is magic in this world. There's a lot of magic in the form of the Hakar, and then you have color mages. You have the infused, or the is it the infused? I'll go with that. And they are pretty much people that have ascended with the arts. So like think of like muses. So they are people who play music, dance, paint, all these kind of things. And during doing these things, they inspire other people. So think of like let's say a musician starts playing a music or any kind of song, and then you automatically get a boon to yourself. So like increased strength or clarity or things like that in war formation. So it's very useful. Um, this magic is accepted, and so is the magic of anything that has to do with Mount Morniar or the Elder King in the world. And then you have people who use mediums to cast magic or use certain magics that are also accepted. Now there are witches or warlocks in this case too who use magic without a medium, and they are the churches or the main religion considers them heretics and wants to burn them at the stake. Delilah, in the middle of finding if one of her friends is a muse or whatever the term for it is, um, they get chased by in a car who's trying to kill them, and she finds out trying to save one of her friends that she has magic, and her magic is mainly healing magic, so she can fully restore things that are injured, and it's crazy. But they sentence her to death. Erethiel, who is Whitehawk's son and Lady Imri's, who is a very prominent, powerful figure in this whole story, is a war general and saves her. He has a thing for collecting strays and saving them, so he saves her and sends her to the church instead as a means of keeping her alive, and says that he's going to be solely responsible for her. By the point that where Yevers comes down from Mount Morniar, Delilah has been in the church for many years, and she is forbidden from using her magic. But she is brought to another witch who is to mentor her, who is also forbidden to use her magic. Um, Crazy things happen. Nora gets burnt half to death by a demon. So her entire right side of her body, her right arm and her right leg are cut off completely. They're just very little stumps. And she's trying to find the will to live again and reclaim the battle fame that she used to have. She was a very prominent, very successful warrior. Um, at this time, where Yevers comes down to find Delilah, who he was pointed to by someone named the Master in the mountain, um, Delilah decides, or he goes to Delilah with a disc that portrays the emotion that that person is giving, and Delilah's is compassion. So they make a pact that she is going to be his compassion and teach him about compassion, which is great. It works out wonderfully. Now, again, remember that Yever's main point is, or main purpose right now, is to learn everything he can about humans and emotions because he doesn't understand them. And in order to understand humans, he has to, or in order to fight the evil, he has to understand what he's fighting for. He has to find his purpose. Um, Longer story short, Airfield decides to gather people to be his Yeveris's emotions. So Chroma, who becomes an exile from a camp that he is in. Chroma's a very interesting character. You guys need to read about him. I think you guys will really like jive with him. He's very cool. I'm not gonna get into too much into his story because I don't want to spoil everything. So Chroma ends up being Rage. Nora ends up being Hope. Airfield ends up being Will or something like that, and Delilah ends up being Compassion. We find out who Fear is later on, but I'm not going to spoil that for you because Fear is tied into who the serial killer is. I want to piggyback to Nora. So Nora, after being maimed by the demon, is sent back to her parents. Her parents are very devout and are against anything to do with the Elder King. They are for a sect that worships the people who are what's the word observed. So in this world, there is a disease that erases people from history. So everybody will forget about this person once they are forgotten. So they are the observed who will never be forgotten. Anyway, they're kind of like a sect or a cult, and it's horrible. They're very like to themselves, and they keep away from everybody, and nobody else is worthy. Anyway, so Nora goes back to them unwillingly after she has been, half released from her body, and they take care of her as best they can, including her in this cult. They take her to church one day, and her brother, who's become now a prominent leader in the church, kind of like strips her down to like show everybody what happened to her and how this is absolution for all her sins or whatever. Nora leaves the church crying, and then she's like limping away. Obviously, she has like a cane or like a crutch, and she and one leg and one arm. Um, and Nora's wronged some people in her journey, and one of these people takes revenge on her and sends two people to essentially kill her, but they almost kill her, but instead they rape her. They take turns raping her. Mind you, she's a cripple at this point, and they cut off the rest of her limbs, so she's now essentially limbless. And it takes her quite a while to come back from that. Once Yevers comes down, Nora begs him, after a series of long events, to take her to the mountain, so she can be made whole. And he does. And the blacksmith, who is the master crafter, a deity that's very powerful, creates for her prosthetics that she can add to her body, and he changes her heart and puts like this fruit that gives off fire throughout her whole body. Her body essentially changes. She still looks human. It's just and I think of like a cyborg is what I want to think of her as. And she becomes very powerful. Her arms and legs become weapons whenever she wants to. They're made out of these really cool, I don't know, like dragon scales and stuff like that, and metals, and they can shift at her will to whatever she wants them to be. Anyway, so they go to war against the Akar, and some people die. I'm not going to say who dies. But in the end, this story it kind of wraps up. And here, this is a part. This is why I didn't give this a 5 out of 5. I feel like the first 80% of the book was very well paced. The last 20% was a little rushed, in my opinion. And I wanted to see this grand finale. I wouldn't have minded if the book was an extra 100 pages long, or if they would have just sped the first, 75%, 80% of the book. Um, but the last fight and what happens afterward, to me, was a little rushed. Now, again, I say some people die. I won't mention who, but Yevers eventually goes back to the mountain, and his father asks him, "Well, what did you learn about humans?" And he says, "I've learned many things. I've learned hope from people who were supposed to give me rage. I've learned compassion from people that were full of fear, or all these different emotions intermingle. Not fear. Fear wasn't one of them, but um, and the king says, "Well, what do you want to do?" And he says, "I want to see the path that humans take." And the king asks him, "Well, what if that path um, leads to destruction?" And he's like, "I won't interfere with them. I just want to see the choices that they make and why they make them." And the king gives him his blessing. He says, "You are now ready to go fight the evil in the world." Now, a lot of things happen, obviously, and that I'm skipping because it's only a video. I'm not going to be here for like 5 hours talking to you about the book. You got to read it. Um, in my opinion, this is probably one of the best articulated dark books that I've ever read. The characters are very, very well written. You're gonna find things you like and you hate about each one. Um, it is not the most pleasant book to read. Again, it is very dark. A lot of cruel things happen. If you're not into that, you've been warned early on in this video. Don't read this book. It's not like a great book for your mental health if you've gone through some trauma relating to some of the things that I've said. Um, but I really recommend it. It's refreshing to read a book that's this dark and this good at the same time. I hope the book number 2, which was mentioned at the afterword of this book, is released soon. I can't wait to see what happens. Hopefully the series continues. I don't know in which direction, because this was a pretty good ending point. So, but yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this. And just let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching. Stick around, and I will see you guys on the next one. Take care.